Hello everyone, my name is Markus Puschenreiter. I'm working at BOKU University in the Institute of Soil Science, and I would like to introduce my colleague Walter Wenzel, who is working in the same institute. We are here in the so-called soil classroom in front of a soil profile, and I would like to know, Walter, what is soil?
Well, Markus, that's a really good question. Soil is almost everything. It's the basis of our life. It's the skin of our Earth, of our globe. And if you look at it more closely, it's composed of a solid phase, of a pore system which contains a liquid phase and a gaseous phase, so the air. And the solid phase again is made of different compounds, including organic matter, including mineral phase.
How long does it take for soil development? Is it a matter of decades, centuries, thousands of years? What is the span of soil formation typically?
Typically in our region, here in Central Europe, we account for something like 12,000 years since the last glaciation. However, in some places which had not been glaciated, we find also much older soils in our region. If you go to the tropics, hundreds, thousands, perhaps millions of years that form deep soil profiles, oxic soil profiles.
In soil we find also a lot of organisms, microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, but also animals like earthworms. Then there are plant roots. So my question would be, what is the role of these organisms in soil processes in general, but also in soil formation processes?
Well, Markus, I think it's better to show this at the profile here. You can see a profile showing a Chernozem, typical for the region, with a humic upper mineral soil. And if you look closely, you see the roots, you see biopores, which are derived from, for instance, earthworms and other soil animals. And of course, there's a lot of microorganisms, including fungi, including bacteria, which we won't see just by looking at it like here. So the role of all those organisms is input of organic substances, of protons by the root system, which changes the soil. It has an important role in weathering. It accelerates the weathering of minerals by several times relative to a soil which has no roots and no microorganism. If you look at the earthworms, they eat up the remnants of plants, including root remnants and litter, and form soil humus. You may see in some cases in the bigger pores worm casts that very important also for plant nutrition again, because this is kind of recycling of nutrients and other compounds. All the biota in the soil system have a vital role in soil functioning. Recycling of nutrients by mineralization, a lot of other functions, including also the development of soil structure. Roots, both roots and soil organism, they are working together to create, for instance, granular structure, which is what we like to see in a good garden soil and a good agricultural soil.
Why is this granular structure important? What does it improve concerning soil quality?
Well, it's highly porous, highly organic material which can keep the water, hold the water, so water storage function. It also allows water to infiltrate easily. It is increasing the stability of aggregates. It's part of aggregates actually, it's an aggregate. And therefore also such soils are easily penetrable by plant roots. They are well aerated and therefore all the functioning of microorganism is well established. Mineralization of nutrients, water availability, everything works well.
Walter, our society is facing the loss and the degradation of soil. What are the reasons for that?
Well, Markus, there is a number of reasons, primarily human impact, of course, even though there are also natural degradation processes like natural erosion that can be considered. But overall, in a globalizing world with overpopulation, we find a high pressure on soil, pressure that leads to soil sealing because of infrastructure development, pressure that also develops into soil erosion and soil compaction, which means physical degradation of soil. And then there's a number of chemical impacts on soil, pollution by organic compounds, pollution by metals, metalloids, radioactive compounds, acidification. And we also observe in the last decades declining organic matter contents in soil. And in several regions, especially dry lands of the world, we also see salinization.
Now, the European Commission initiated a framework directive to preserve soil as a resource for future generations. What were the aims, what were the objectives of this soil framework directive? To improve soil and to preserve soil for our future.
Well, soil in the first place is not easily transportable if we do not consider erosion. So you may think it's a more national issue. However, if we look at transportation processes in the landscape, soil material that is transported into rivers, passing borders, you may see soils also as a cross-boundary issue. And that was the main motivation of the European Union, of the European Commission, to suggest a thematic strategy for soils. That was the first approach, a more general paper outlining the main ideas of soil protection in Europe. And this should be followed finally by a framework directive on soils, which, as you said, didn't pass because I think it was 5 member states were opposing it.
What were the reasons for that? Why was it rejected by some of the member states?
Well, personally, I understand very well why it was rejected by some member states, because this framework directive was not really a framework. It was not really focusing on measures, on actions, and it did not define, like the water directive, it did not define targets like pollutant concentrations in soils that should not be exceeded, or erosion rates that should not be exceeded. So it was not really operational, apart from the main focus finally, which was on soil monitoring and harmonization of soil monitoring. And this was also one of the reasons of rejection, because a number of member states, with good reason, said, okay, we have soil monitoring in place, we have a lot of soil data, why create new soil data, additional administrative work, and so on. So it was not really supporting soil protection, it was supporting soil monitoring and harmonization of soil monitoring.
So let's see what happens in the future, if there will be some re-initiation, some improvement of the soil framework directive, some new proposal. And I think during the EMI course we will discuss in details about the initial aims, but also about the reasons like Walt already explained briefly, what were the reasons for rejecting the Soil Framework Directive, and how could an improved version look like. Thank you very much.